Breaking right now, new details on that phone call between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The phone call lasted for over an hour, here in actually close to 2 hours. Now, remember, the White House is looking to ink a deal and put an end to the bloodshed taking over the region. That phone call is a key step in making this happen. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is live at the White House now with more information about that call. Ed, good to see you. What do you know?
Mugo, the headline out of this statement from the White House is that they appear to have agreed, the president and the Russian leader, on a ceasefire for, I want to describe it as energy and infrastructure ceasefire, and that negotiations over a permanent ceasefire and ultimately peace, quote, will begin immediately in the Middle East. A statement from the White House saying that President Trump and President Putin spoke about the need for peace and a ceasefire in the Ukraine war. Both leaders agreed this conflict needs to end with a lasting peace. They also stressed the need for improved bilateral relations between the United States and Russia. The blood and treasure that both Ukraine and Russia have been spending in this war would be better spent on the needs of their people, this statement says. Later it says that that the conflict should never have started and should have been ended long ago with sincere and good faith peace efforts. The leaders agreed that the movement to peace will begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, as well as technical negotiations on implementation of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, full ceasefire, and permanent peace. These negotiations will begin immediately in the Middle East. It says the two of them also spoke broadly about the Middle East as a region of potential cooperation to prevent future conflicts. They further discussed the need to stop proliferation of strategic weapons and will engage with others to ensure the broadest possible application. The two leaders shared the view that Iran should never be in a position to destroy Israel, a notable bit of the conversation given what's going on in that region of the world this day. The two leaders agreed that a future with an improved bilateral relationship between the United States and Russia has huge upside. This includes enormous economic deals and geopolitical stability when peace has been achieved. So, they're not saying it explicitly, but it sounds like what is being announced here is that Russia is agreeing to the ceasefire arrangement, and that ceasefire talks will commence immediately somewhere in the Middle East. Most of them so far, at least regarding Ukraine, have been held in Saudi Arabia. We'll see if it's Saudi Arabia or somewhere else. As expected, this call then also touched on the overnight hostilities that flared up again between Israel and Hamas, and then the broader goal that the president has stated of renewing and restoring U.S.-Russia relations beyond this conflict to a broader economic and geopolitical relationship, getting it back to what it once was. That's been a stated goal of President Trump since his first term, and one that he certainly campaigned on and is pushing for right now. So we'll wait for more details on where exactly these ceasefire talks would commence. What exactly did Russia ask for during the call? What else was discussed? There is some reporting from the Russian news agency TASS that the two presidents agreed to keep in touch. There may be some kind of a prisoner of war swap being prepared between Russia and Ukraine, and that they will keep talking about what part of Ukraine's territory exactly is really up for discussion. So we'll see what else beyond that. But again, a sign that this was a successful call in that there are at least agreements to keep talking, and perhaps more specifically and more urgently about a broader and permanent ceasefire and ultimately peace. We also will wait for what the Ukrainians make of this and whether they are party to these talks that are set to begin, according to the president's statement, immediately in the Middle East, and who exactly from the Ukrainian side might be involved in those. There is no current plan for President Trump to talk to President Zelensky, for example, about what went on today. We'll hear about whether any U.S. official is briefing the Ukrainians, or if this is just going to proceed with the Ukrainians on the sideline. That would be, of course, a huge departure in how the U.S. has handled this situation during the Biden years, but that has been the point of the Trump administration, to do it differently. And it's resulted in this call that, as you said, lasted under 2 hours, started around 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We had been told it would begin somewhere between 9 and 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and it went on into the 12 p.m. Eastern hour, and it has resulted in this statement. We also don't have a full readout, by the way, from the Russians, so we'll wait and see if they have anything more to say, Mugo.
All right, we shall wait and see. Ed O'Keefe live for us from the White House with some breaking news. Really appreciate your time this morning on the stream. Thank you. Afternoon, I should say. Now let's bring in Mark Kansian. He is the senior advisor with the Defense and Security Department at the Center of Strategic and International Studies. Mark, thank you for joining us as well. I want to read a piece of what was just said from the White House. They say, quote, "The leaders agreed that the movement to peace will begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, as well as technical negotiations on implementation of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, full ceasefire, and permanent peace." Now, these negotiations will continue immediately in the Middle East. Your reaction to that?
Well, I think it's both encouraging and discouraging. It's encouraging because the two countries are talking. There's no indication in the whole statement that there was any bitterness or any break off of talks. In fact, they've talked about continuing the discussions, but it's disappointing because they did not agree to a 30-day ceasefire. I mean, at the front lines, they're going to keep shooting at each other. They agreed to stop attacking each other's infrastructure and energy. Both sides have been attacking the other's infrastructure. And then they said that they'll continue talks about a ceasefire. Sounds like the first thing will be some sort of maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, and then, of course, a permanent peace settlement. So this is the first step of what's probably going to be a very long road and a little disappointing. I think many people had thought that the killing would stop. At this point, it's not going to.
Yeah, and I know you say this is disappointing, and you did also very much point out the fact that they did not agree to that 30-day ceasefire deal that Ukraine had said they are willing to accept. But in your opinion, do you think this is a positive step to finally, hopefully, putting an end to this war?
Oh, it's certainly a positive step because ending attacks on infrastructure and energy is an important reduction in the suffering of civilians on both sides. So that's good in itself. It just isn't the big step I think that many had hoped for.
Right. And I want to bring back the topic of Ukraine here, because initially Volodymyr Zelensky, the president there, had said, yes, he is open to that 30-day ceasefire deal. And now they're not necessarily getting the ceasefire deal they had hoped for. And this conversation was between President Trump and President Putin. Do you think at some point Ukraine will be brought back to the table to continue these discussions?
Well, I certainly hope so. It would be fair that when its future is being discussed, that it have a role in the discussion of that future. President Trump has preferred to deal one-on-one, deals with President Zelensky, deals with President Putin. We'll see what happens in the Middle East when they continue these discussions. But although I would certainly hope that they bring in not just Ukraine, but also Europe, so far, President Trump's approach has been one-on-one.
So in your opinion and your expertise, what do you think should come next at this point? After this phone call, which was almost 2 hours long with President Putin and President Trump, what's the next step in your opinion?
It sounds like the next step is another meeting in the Middle East like they had a week ago. And maybe they can do something on the maritime ceasefire, maybe even on a 30-day ceasefire. But that's probably as far as they're going to get. As I said, this is looking to be a very long process. Keep in mind that the negotiations to end the war in Korea and the war in Vietnam took years, not weeks.
Right. So it sounds like there's way, much more to come at this point, you would say, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Mark Kansian, thank you so much.